This is another debate which is great because the debaters are actually conversing with one another rather than just making some points and then waiting for the other guy to present rebuttals. This one is between Christopher Hitchens and Frank Turek, and a lot of the arguments Turek uses are the same as the ones he usually uses. One of his arguments is the moral argument.
Now, Christopher talked about atrocities, but again, on the atheistic worldview, here's the main point. How do you define what an atrocity is? Who defines it? Who has the authority to define what an atrocity is? The carbon atom? The benzene molecule? I'm not saying you have to believe in God to be moral. I'm not saying that only religious people are moral. I'm not saying atheists can't be moral. I'm not saying atheists don't know morality. I'm saying there's no way to justify what is right and what is wrong unless there's some authority that provides it.
That authority is our consciences. I don't feel the need to look for justification for my actions beyond my conscience. If my conscience makes me feel guilty enough to avoid a behavior, I'm going to avoid that behavior regardless of whether morality is objective or not. If my conscience makes me feel that some behavior is wrong, I don't give a shit whether it conforms to some external standard. And I see no reason why I ought to give a shit. The question of whether they are consistent with anyone else's or with some cosmic standard is totally irrelevant to me. Turek also argued that atheism can't explain the origins of the universe, and Hitchens points out that it doesn't really need to.
I don't have to know. You do. You're the one who says you know, not me. The theist and the deist say, oh, come on, we know. This is only possible with an author. It's only possible with a creator. It's only possible with a master and commander. It's only possible with a dictator. You're welcome. I don't need 5 minutes.
But then Turek's response is really interesting.
Is it fair to say, though, that if the creation was out of nothing, and that's the common view today, that the being that brought it into existence, the cause, whatever it was...
Don't say being. What ground do you have to say being?
Because to go from a state of non-existence to a state of existence, you need to make a choice.
No, you don't.
I think Turek might get this idea from William Lane Craig. It is often pointed out that even if you were to prove that the universe had a cause, that doesn't show that that cause had to be a conscious being. The response Craig and Turek pose is that because the cause had to be something outside the universe, it had to be something outside the rules of cause and effect. And Craig believes that conscious minds have free will that is not determined by the rules of cause and effect. Of course, this, I think, is also an assertion that is unsupported, but let's say it's true. It still doesn't make any sense to say that the universe, especially time, changed from a state of non-existence to a state of existence. There never was or ever could be a state of non-existence because non-existence is not a state. Also, change is inherently temporal. It is a difference between one point in time and another point in time. It therefore makes no sense for time itself to change from not existing to existing. A difference between a state of affairs in which time does not exist and a point within time does not constitute a change.
Again, how do you get something from nothing?
I am not the one who has to answer the question. Excuse me, you're the one who has to answer the question. You're the one who claims to know. You say there was a creation moment and a creator. I want to know why you're changing the subject and saying to me, how do I not know this?
I don't know why some theists have such a problem with atheists simply saying, I don't know why the universe exists, but I'm not convinced it's God. They object to this as though if atheists don't have an answer of their own, they for some reason are not allowed to dismiss the answer theists give. Not having an explanation of your own does not make you incapable of identifying when other explanations are ridiculous. After a while, they get back onto the subject of morality.
I'm not saying you don't know morality, Christopher. I'm saying you can't justify morality without a being beyond yourself.
So that, okay, good. So that if I say that for me it's enough to be willing to love my fellow man and perhaps hope that my fellow man and woman will give me some of the same consideration in return, and that, after all, the Samaritan, of whom we've all heard, was the only one to help after the priests and the Levites had passed by. And the Samaritan also, though he's talked of by Jesus, can't have been a Christian because he appears in a story told by Jesus, so there can't be any Christianity before that. Somehow, he knew the moral thing to do is to help his fellow person without a religious instruction.
Yes,
that's actually the whole point of the parable, though it's not the way it's usually told.
And that's what Christianity teaches. You know morality. It's written on your heart. You don't need the scripture to know right from wrong.
If we naturally have a sense of morality, then what fucking difference does it make whether it has an external justification? Why does it matter? If our moral intuitions guide us, regardless of whether morality is anything more than an intuition, then the question of its objectivity is entirely inconsequential. If there is an objective standard of morality and that objective standard says that we should condemn homosexuality or not give gay couples the same respect and recognition we give straight couples, then I'm not going to obey that objective standard because my conscience wouldn't allow me to. So whether my conscience does or does not reflect some objective standard is completely and totally irrelevant to me. And then there's this funny bit.
Where does evil come from?
Religion. And to answer your next question, morality comes from humanism and is stolen by religion for its own purposes.
Humanism according to who? Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, who?
You're saying that Hitler was a humanist?
Just Hitchens.
I've lived to hear it said.
Hitchens.
Zing! I think my favorite point that Hitchens makes was in response to Turek's argument that if Jesus rose from the dead, he is therefore God, and his teachings are true.
And it wouldn't prove that any of his moral teachings were thereby correct. Nor, if I was to see him executed one day and see him walking the streets the next, would that show that his father was God, or his mother was a virgin, or that his teachings were true, especially given the commonplace nature of resurrection at that time and place. After all, Lazarus was raised, never said a word about it. The daughter of Jairus was raised, didn't say a thing about what she'd been through. And the Gospels tell us that at the time of the crucifixion, all the graves in Jerusalem opened, and their occupants wandered around the streets to greet. So that it seems the resurrection was something of a banality at the time. Not all of those people clearly were divinely conceived. So I'll give you all the miracles, and you'll still be left exactly where you are now, holding an empty sack.
So check out that debate. It was pretty entertaining.